all.
Hello.
My name is Siim Teller. I'm the head of growth and community at Wire.
I am Dejan, I'm software engineer at Wire.
And I'll now switch to screen sharing. Hopefully it doesn't break anything and we can actually... Cool. We'll continue on the security theme and talk about end-to-end encryption with focus on work, using end-to-end encryption at work and for work. And I'd start with a claim that end-to-end encryption has actually become the norm, at least in communications, but that's true for consumers or the normal people, because of these apps, you probably recognize a couple of those icons, WhatsApp, Viber, Wire, Threema, Signal. Collectively, they give over 1 billion people almost on a daily basis access to seamless end-to-end encrypted chats and calls. But businesses are left behind. When you think about end-to-end encrypted communication tools, then there's not really much choice for companies. And the result is sort of sad in a way. I have a couple of examples of fairly recent hacks. So HipChat got hacked half a year ago, and not just their accounts compromised or their users' accounts compromised, but actually hackers got access to the contents of their conversations. So you can imagine if you're a fairly security or focused company, that's not very fun news to read on the next web. Slack has gotten hacked the same way, and probably the most recent example, Deloitte was compromised with the emails of their clients revealed. So if you're a Deloitte customer, you're probably not very excited about that news either. And internally, we have sort of a joke, but it's not really, that if you're not using end-to-end encryption, at least for communication again, then it's a data breach waiting to happen. Obviously, there are also tools available for data at rest and so on that you should be using. Wire, as a communication company, we're a bit more focused on the communication side of things. And why is that? Why do you have this situation where businesses are left behind? I have a couple of suggestions there. One is that security is too expensive for especially small and medium businesses. And it's not always just the money, the price of the tools, but it's also technical skills and time it takes to research, understand, implement, and then train the staff as well. It's easier to go with something that claims to be secure and is to an extent, but doesn't offer the best security. Also, security is limiting, both in terms of features. Historically, the very secure solutions have lagged behind. They, for whatever reason, tend to have poorer user experience, and also access is probably more limited. So as a result, employees are switching to consumer products because they are familiar with those from their friends and family conversations. And if they're using WhatsApp or Wire, obviously that's fun because it's still end-to-end encrypted. So security-wise, you're kind of good, but the communication is happening outside of the company jurisdiction, so to speak. Not really something that should happen, especially in some areas like medical or financial, where you have fairly strict regulation in terms of how to collect and monitor employee communications. A lot of those products that are today available are very US-centric. So especially the European Union, who's a bit more strict when it comes to data protection, citizens EU are at a disadvantage because they don't typically have much control over which tools they're using. And there's also upcoming new legislation in the European Union. Not sure how many of you're familiar, hopefully all are, with the GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulation, which sets much stricter rules on data protection of EU citizens, and that doesn't affect just European Union companies, but everybody who offers services to EU citizens. And we've seen a lot of recent interest driven by this law, which takes effect in May 2018. It affects all different aspects of your business, so you might want to look into it anyway if you haven't done yet. We think that we have an answer to a lot of these problems. Maybe some of you are familiar with Wire. We've been working on it for a while. The recent big change is that we launched a version that is meant for teams for businesses. And how that's different from the consumer side is you actually get team management tools so that you control who's in the conversations. Someone leaves the company, you can remove them with one tap and remove the access to the history with one tap. But it gives you the consumer user experience and feature richness that we've come to expect from sort of modern tools. So trying to marry two sides. Quick overview of Wire sort of foundations. We are headquartered in Switzerland. All our servers are in EU, in Germany and Ireland. So again, we follow the strict European Union data protection law there. As I mentioned, everything on Wire is end-to-end encrypted, your calls, your chats, your files, and privacy is at our core, and that comes from having a simple, very user-centric privacy policy, but also the underlying transparency that because all our code is open source, you don't have to take our word for it. You can actually look into it and verify it this way. And companies and people have done it, and I'll get to that in a second. And the big thing we're kind of helping organizations with is really email threat, because to this day, email is the biggest threat vector. It's not, so humans are the problem. And email is beautiful because it's open, but anyone can email anyone, but that's also its biggest weakness, that it's open. Anyone can spam and try to spearfish and whatnot with everyone. Normal people have trouble understanding or identifying which are the malicious emails. So as a result, there's a high success rate. And what Wire does differently is that you actually need to be connected to the person first. So if you use it for team communication, you're kind of guarded against the large universe outside of the organization. At least you can trust the messages and files coming from your colleagues. Now I mentioned that you don't have to take our word for the state of security. We've published independent security audit done by Kudelski Security and X41 DSEC. That was earlier this year. And we're continuing to work with them because we believe that technology is moving so fast that if you publish the security audit 3 years ago, then it's probably already out of date. And that should be sort of a continuous process. So next audits are coming hopefully in months' time. And secondly, probably the world's best known, how to say, technical dissident, technology dissident, Edward Snowden is endorsing two communication apps, and one of them is Wire. Snowden likes that Wire doesn't require a phone number to register. As I mentioned, Wire is open for business. I'll end the pitching part here, but what I want to focus on next, and what Dejan is going to talk about in more detail, is one thing we noticed already before the launch is that a lot of the companies were speaking about these threats and tools is that, okay, we like the idea, but what we're used to today is integrations with third-party tools. So do you have integrations? And our response was always yes, but the beta label is the but part. We've been working on the integrations API for a while. What makes it unique is that this is also end-to-end encrypted. So if I'm talking to a third-party service through Wire, then the message or file is encrypted on my device. passes through wire, so the wire sees that there's a message but doesn't know what the content is. It's decrypted at the service. The service then does whatever the service logic requires to do, encrypts it again, sends it back to my device or my devices. So wire is kind of a dumb pipe or secure pipe in that sense. I'll hand it over now to Dejan, who's going to talk a bit more about the technical details and a couple of examples as well.
Thanks, Siim. So some of you might be already implementing some bots or some integrations on different platforms like Facebook or Telegram. I would like to present a Wire API in this case. We also have a RESTful API, so today it's probably the standard. Everybody is familiar with it. Everybody's used to it. We have documentation in Swagger. It's quite thorough and big. Our code is open source fully. Client code is open source. You can find it on Git. Our server backend is open source, written in Haskell. We have this RESTful integration API that would allow you to have your own service running on your premises, on your servers, connecting to Wire and then connecting to Wire users. That would allow you to run a custom logic using Wire platform. You can go and study the API and implement your own clients on top of it, or you can use SDKs that we provide. We already done this heavy lifting. Currently, we have Java implementation, Node.js implementation, and Rust. Documentation is, I believe, good. So if somebody is interested, I can point out where it can be found on GitHub. Also, we provide various examples, very simple ones, just to bring your attention and to maybe give you an idea what can be done. The examples are mainly written in Java and Node. And also you can find their scripts for deployment, because eventually you will have to deploy your code somewhere. Probably most of you are familiar with Heroku or Google Cloud, Amazon Cloud. Simply, you can use those scripts, build your own Docker image, and deploy the code. Your servers would talk to Wire backend over TLS. You would require public IP for it, and you would have to register as a bot developer using yet another bot for it. So the key point here is that the code is running on your servers and running an encryption and decryption there. So the keys never go out from your environment. Wire never sees those keys, and you are responsible for them. I would like to show a couple of examples that are already in place in production. For example, this is the Deutsche Bank assistant. It's a simple bot that uses a Wire platform to talk to Deutsche Bank servers. So allows users, customers, to control their accounts. In this case, it gives them the overview of their expenses, groups them, runs some analysis on top of it, shows the balance. Yeah. Cool thing about this bot is that it has some cool features, like it has a text-to-speech, which, yeah, some people might find interesting and cool. It has a natural language processing on top of it, so the commands are not strict, but it can be more like in a natural way. So it doesn't feel like you're talking to a machine that much. And some Another integration is like if you're a developer, probably you're using different continuous integration servers where you're running your integration tests, your unit tests, and you're running automation deployments. In this case, you would receive plenty of emails notifying you if the build failed and the statuses and everything. Those emails, they get either lost or just very confusing to go over them. We use this integration in Wire to show us these notifications directly in Wire, where we can isolate particular projects that we're interested in and show them just to a smaller set of people that are interested in. Later on, you can collaborate on those notifications, forward them and reference them and so on. This one is well known. It's a GitHub integration. We use it to publish new PRs, pull requests. If there is a comment in there or like some issue, it's nicely incorporated in our team's conversation there. We're working on putting more logic in this integration that would allow us to automate some steps, like automatically assigning issues, adding some comments, adding labels, and so on. So helps us during our daily routines. This is simple chatbot. It's based on an open source Pandora bots framework, and it's just like a demonstration to our users. If they are just bored, they would like to chat with somebody, but they have nobody to, they can chat to a bot.
Yeah, the surprising thing there was we expected people to maybe exchange a couple of messages with them, figure out it's a bot, it's not very intelligent. But then surprisingly saw that some people carried on for days, hundreds of messages. So it's a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah, people use it actually even for notes. They would send a text. This example is of Autobot. If you use Wire for a longer period of time, like if you joined like 2 years ago, you would notice that you get automatically connected to this bot, and this cool guy would walk you through Wire, show you different Wire features, demonstrate how to do things, and even ask you like some small tests, like so you can perform in front of it. Yet another example. This is a chef bot. So instead of going on the browser and searching for a recipe, you can directly search within Wire and get a recipe. This bot also can have a communication towards you, so it can ping you if there is something that maybe you should cook on Saturday evening. And yeah, we'd like to hand it over to Siim to talk about the future.
Yeah, as Dejan showed, then the examples have quite the range from very sort of where privacy and security is very important, the bank example, to where it's not that important, where it's more about fun. And also with some of the customers, we see that they might not have the technical skills to run these integrations on their own server. So probably in the future, we'll release a sort of a default pack of integrations that you can also opt to run on our server, but that's kind of future. Where we see the whole integration of going for Wire is that the first step is these business integrations, back office, CRM, calendaring. Chatbot for consumers, like the Deutsche Bank example, is another direction that is very interesting. And then maybe a bit further down the line is sort of IoT related things where there's the human to machine and machine to machine communication. And the previous speaker mentioned automotive. We've been talking to a couple of large car manufacturers, and they're very concerned that in the very near future, you have a smart car, you have car owner with app that connects to the car and to the car manufacturer. You have smart keys that connect to both of those, and then you have the car manufacturer that is getting telemetrics from the car, but also uploading software patches, how to make sure that all that communication is secure from hackers, basically. So Wire's underlying protocol is very well suited for this because it's end-to-end encryption between multiple devices, keeping things in sync. Yeah, so basically that's the end of our very quick overview of this end-to-end encrypted chat integration API and Wire in general. So if you have any questions about the integrations, we're happy to take them now or add Dejan on Wire and ping him directly. But also if you're interested in more about the Wire, using Wire in your team, then obviously wire.com is the place to get the information, or add me on Wire. I'm at Teller. Happy to take any questions that way as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys. That was a really great presentation. Do we have any questions from the audience? We're coming up to a coffee break. Oh, John, just hang a sec so they can hear you.
Just a question on especially the enterprise solutions and how you would deploy with an enterprise. Where would the data be stored? Since you're working with Deutsche Bank.
Alan, can you please repeat the question?
Where would the data be stored? The specific data, any of the interactions from the chat, any information that's shared with the customer?
Yeah. So right now, everything's stored on our cloud. It is obviously end-to-end encrypted, and we don't have the keys. We hold the messages for 30 days. Again, this is there for so that we can sync between the devices. But obviously, all the conversation is also stored at the end devices. So on the customer device, and then the service provider, if it's a customer service rep or whoever. One of the things where you get asked, especially from financial organizations, but also from governmental and others as well, is we need history backup for, say, legal reasons. So that's one thing we're working on. And maybe related to that is also our server open sourcing effort. So I mentioned earlier that the server code is open source. It's still kind of full of dependencies, so it's tricky to run on your own. But next year we're going to release also self-hostable server option, and even further down the line, federation option. So if you're a bank, you can start running Wire in-house. And then if you want to offer services also to your customers, then just federate your cloud with the main Wire universe.
Thank you. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Siim, Dejan. That was a great presentation. Thanks a lot, guys.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Okay, bye-bye.